Of course. We want to welcome you all to the Humanities and Positive Youth Development hosted by the Pennsylvania Humanities Council. We're so excited that so many of you have decided to join us for today's presentation. We're going to hear from some great presenters, including Dr. Valerie Adams-Bass and some of our TRL practitioners. I just wanted to do a few reminders before we get started. Can we advance the slide? And I'm going to be your moderator for today. My name is Jen Danifer, like I mentioned, Senior Program Officer at Pennsylvania Humanities Council. And one more slide. And a few housekeeping items before we get started. Number one, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that we are recording today's session. And so we're going to ask that you guys mute yourselves because we have a few presenters today that are on with us on the line. So we can't mute everybody, so please make sure to mute yourselves. We know many of you are doing double duty or sitting at the front desk at a library, or you may even be at a school where things are kind of nutty. So we ask that you do that, and then during the Q&A session, we'll ask everybody to take themselves off mute if they have a question, or we can use, of course, the chat box for the Q&A as well. Mimi Ijima is here with me, our Director of Programs and Special Projects, and she's going to be manning the chat box. If you guys have questions throughout the course of today's presentation or you want to make comments, Mimi will kind of be manning that and can pick those up as you type those in. So the last thing I'm going to say, I mentioned that we're also recording today's webinar. We want to share it today with folks that are in our network, and all of you on the call or all of you that registered for the call will receive the recording as well as the slides, to share and to listen to again. So yeah, thanks all for joining us today. Okay, next slide. So today's learning goals. Today's presentation is, about the humanities and how they intersect with positive youth development. Again, we're going to hear from Valerie. She's going to do some talking about what exactly is positive youth development, and then we're going to hear from our practitioners about how they've used Teen Reading Lounge to kind of address and really support positive youth development in the young people in their community. But we believe in learning goals, as you guys do when you're thinking about your Teen Reading Lounge program. So today, it's a special series we've designed to educate our network about the value of humanities programming like Teen Reading Lounge. And it's also, like I mentioned, a way for us to highlight our talented sites and share the best practices and what they've learned. We hope that you guys walk away with a better understanding of positive youth development and the elements of positive youth development programs. We hope that you understand why positive youth development is important for all young people. You'll hear today from our sites and the different groups of young people they're working with and how to apply this work to different groups of young people because positive youth development is important for all. We also hope you understand how Teen Reading Lounge can help support positive youth development. And then finally, some strategies that you guys can use, whether you're doing Teen Reading Lounge or doing other kinds of programs or working with youth in different ways to help foster positive youth development in your own work. And one thing I want to mention is that, this is important because as you guys are out there talking with your folks about the value of what your organization does for young people, the importance of positive youth development can be a powerful message. It really demonstrates how informal learning opportunities like Teen Reading Lounge can support the development of young people, and it shows how it's relevant. We're talking about building skills in young people, about making sure that they come out as better critical thinkers, better communicators, more ready for the workforce and for education and for just life in general. And we believe that it really shows the return on investment for these programs. And this is important. This is critical for PHC to demonstrate, not only to get additional funding, but to show the value that you guys, our grantees, how you guys are contributing to this field. And we hope that you use it as a way to show the impact in your community and why investments in young people matter. Okay, so just a little bit. I know many of you on the call already know and love the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, but we always like to do a little bit of review of who PHC is and what Teen Reading Lounge is specifically. So before we dive into Valerie's presentation, I wanted to take a few minutes to tell you about PHC and the Teen Reading Lounge program. The PHC is an independent partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and part of 56 state humanities councils that span the nation and U.S. jurisdictions. We really believe in putting the humanities in action to create positive change. We also want to bring Pennsylvanians together to build avenues for civic involvement, community development, and for youth and adult learners to strengthen their skills for schoolwork and personal improvement. We have two focus areas, civic engagement and education, but we also do many special projects and events that demonstrate the impact and value of the humanities on PA residents, including the young people you're working with. We want to invite you at the end of the presentation.
Hello?
You'll see a link for.
Hello?
Hello?
It's Shakira.
Hey, Shakira, we're just getting started. If you wouldn't mind just muting yourself for now, and then we'll let you know when we're ready for the practitioner panel.
Okay, yeah, sure. You guys are breaking up a bit, but okay, I got you. I just hope you guys can hear me.
We can hear you great. Awesome. Thanks, Shakira. Yeah, and if you want to learn more about PhD, please visit our website at pahumanities.org, and we'll share that website again at the end of the webinar. Next slide. So a little bit about Teen Reading Lounge. All of you, I think pretty much all of you on the call know and love our Teen Reading Lounge program and have run it at some point, either currently or in the past. We lovingly call it TRL, and it's an interactive humanities program for ages 12 to 18. And it's built on the belief that people can and should take an active role in their learning. It's youth-driven, meaning that teens work side by side with local site staff to build a series that reflects their interests and needs. And the building blocks of the program are texts, books, or readings that the young people select and discuss with one another, and they're usually facilitated by an adult, a librarian, an educator, or an out-of-school time professional that works with young people. The young people also develop special projects that deepen their understanding of the topics and ideas and themes that show up in the books or readings or texts that they're looking at. So through this process, teens learn how to interpret data, how to ask questions, how to share ideas, and consider diverse perspectives and different life experiences. And I should mention, too, you'll see the little picture at the bottom, in the bottom corner there. It's a map with pins. All the red pins represent all of the Teen Reading Lounge sites we've worked with since the program launched in 2010. And that is over 80 sites, libraries, schools, and out-of-school time, community-serving organizations. We've also reached over 1,000 youth from rural, urban, and suburban backgrounds. And we've been providing grants, technical assistance, and training to these libraries so that they may learn how to work with young people and implement the model at their sites. So the final thing I want to say is that the biggest outcomes that we've seen in young people are that they show an improved communication skills, interpersonal skills, critical thinking and problem-solving skills, as well as increased literacy and media skills. And in recent years, we've worked with many libraries and sites, schools to integrate community or civic engagement projects so that young people can give back to their community. Next slide. So this is important because we believe that all young people deserve access to quality learning experiences. And one thing I want to say that's really important to PHC and our mission and Teen Reading Lounge is that, you guys a lot of you may know this, but Pennsylvania is a regressive education funder, meaning that the poorest schools often receive the fewest resources. And we do believe that quality OST learning experiences like TRL can foster positive development in young people regardless of their background, and that all young people should have the opportunity to deepen their understanding of themselves, others, and the world. And a program like TRL really allows them to do that. The program is intentionally flexible. You'll hear from our libraries and school sites about how they've interpreted the program so that these experiences and the learning experience can really be tailored to the young people that are coming from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And regardless of background, youth overwhelmingly reported a stronger appreciation for books, reading, diverse perspectives, and experiences. And they also reported a deeper connection to their communities through some of those civic engagement and community projects that end up, kind of coming out of the Teen Reading Lounge program. And it's important to note that although a wide variety of youth report positive outcomes, the program has really been most impactful for older youth of color, which is really interesting. And that is part of the reason why you'll hear today from Shakira King and Joe Bradley, two of our high school sites that are working with older youth, and many of those youth are coming from backgrounds, different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And that's why we decided to focus that project on young people because we saw a lot of great outcomes with that audience. Great. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce today's expert presenter, Dr. Valerie Adams-Bass. And before I do that, I just wanted to make sure that she was on the call with us and that she can hear us. Valerie, are you with us today?
I am. Good afternoon. I'm here, and I hear you all well.
Good. Awesome. So what I'm going to do, Valerie, is just going to read your very impressive bio. As you guys, many of you guys know Ms. Valerie. She's such a great she's not only, got the background, but she's been an advisor with us and a friend to PHC for a very, very long time, and since 2014, and we're so excited to have her here today. So Valerie is an assistant professor of youth and social innovations, a faculty affiliate of the Youth Next Center to promote effective youth development in the Curry School of Education at the University of Virginia. She's also the Duke Samuel Dubois Cook Center on Social Equity, works at the Cook Center on Social Equity at Duke University, and she's a faculty affiliate of the Racial Empowerment Collaborative at the University of Pennsylvania's Graduate School of Education. Her research interests are how racial socialization and racial identity influence the identity development process of Black adolescents. And she's interested in examining how racial and ethnic socialization experiences are related to the process of identity development, the social and the academic experiences of Black children and youth, and how media exposure influences those interpersonal interactions and self-concept. She regularly trains youth professionals, youth development professionals to use culturally relevant practices when working with African American children and youth. She's done a ton of training for Teen Reading Lounge. She's been, like I mentioned, an advisor and a consultant with us since 2014, and she's helped us make the program more youth responsive, culturally relevant, and replicable in communities working with low-income youth and youth of color, in addition to all of the different communities we've worked with across the state. So Valerie, I'm going to kick it over to you to do your presentation, and we can advance the slides for you.
Great. So good afternoon again, everyone. I'm glad that so many of you were able to join us, and we're just happy to have you here. I will apologize in advance if I sound a little grainy. It happens to be the best or the worst allergy season for me. So I'm going to work through it with you all, and I appreciate you in advance for bearing with me, and definitely raise your hand in the chat room if you cannot hear me, or if I'm a little bit too nasal, and I'll do my best to adjust that. So what we really want to do next is just talk a little bit about what is positive youth development. And so what I'd like to say is many of you are already involved in positive youth development by nature of being a Teen Reading Lounge site now or having been a Teen Reading Lounge site, and all of you that do summer programming. Although you may think of yourself, or those of you at libraries, as a librarian, you really are involved in positive youth development. And the definition from our US.gov is really positive youth development. I'm not going to read this fully, but I do want to say a couple things. It's an intentional and pro-social approach that engages youth within their communities. And why that is important is because it's easy to, I think when we're talking about youth who are at a disadvantage, as been mentioned, or youth of color, sometimes they're the same, other times they're not, poor youth with less resources, there has in the past been a tendency to say, we can take these youth out of their community, put them in a different context, and they'll thrive and they do well, which is not the current definition and model of positive youth development. We say that it is intentional and a pro-social approach, and it's really working with youth within their communities, right, which means you need to create a safe space, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. We do recognize the strengths of young people, and we work with youth to promote and use those strengths, to grow those strengths, and to promote positive life outcomes. So that's how we think about positive youth development. It's a broad definition. It's driven from research on existing program models. Many of the models include national programs such as a Boys and Girls Club, a Girl Scouts of America, Boy Scouts of America, 4-H, but it also includes locally based programs that aren't quite as old as the national models, where researchers just began to take a look and say, what is going on in these out-of-school time places, after-school places, where young people are being served, right? And what is it that we call it? So we entitle it Positive Youth Development. And so those are the things to think about. Certainly local examples of positive youth development is summer reading lounge programs, 21st century community learning centers, as well as the sites that are doing TRL is a program model, right? And so what we understand is that researchers and practitioners, those who work directly with the young people, who support young people coming into the spaces where we work and serve them, really have begun to report that those youth who are involved in positive youth development programs have a more diverse set of perspectives, and that as a result of being engaged with other young people who may or may not be like them, that they have that diverse perspective, their perspectives are broadened, and that they experience more positive outcomes. Those outcomes include, depending on the program, but certainly we've seen this across programs, whether large and national or small, better academic outcomes, decrease in truancy, meaning students are more likely to go to school, an increase in self-image or self-concept, and involvement in their communities. So those are some of the outcomes we see. And we also see that they're less likely to be depressed. They're less likely to be involved in illicit, to engage in use of illicit drugs or illicit or illegal activities. And part of that is because they're engaged in a safe space. The hours after school, between 3:30 and 6, tends to be the heightened period of time where young people can become involved with illicit activity or become disengaged. And so programs that serve young people in the out-of-school time hours after the school day or during the summer really help to address that issue of working with those young people, giving them something productive to do, and supporting their growth and development. So I know that was a whole mouthful, but I just wanted to give you that context. So this includes the work of people like you who are involved with young people, whether at a library, an out-of-school time site, or elsewhere. This is what drives this definition. Because of that, one of the things that we like to think about in terms of TRL, Jenna's already given you a robust definition of the teen reading lounge. Some of you are recent participants. Some of you have participated in TRL in the past, but we like to think TRL as a humanities project is providing and supporting positive youth development. And we do that through, again, that word intentional, civic engagement. So, Jen, if you could advance the slide. So what is civic engagement? Some people may consider civic engagement, say, well, we work on citizenship at our site. We work on some other form of youth involvement in the community. Is the civic engagement? And I would argue that most likely it is. So when we think about civic engagement, it is really working. It's young people and exclusively adults who are working to make a difference. I'm going to pause for a minute, and I'm going to say I hear feedback. So if someone could mute their phone, that would be great, unless it's my phone.
No, Valerie, we hear it too. This is Jen. We just want to remind folks to make sure you guys mute yourselves. We can't mute the line because we got Valerie and some other presenters with us on, and we'll mute them if we mute the whole line. So please make sure to mute yourselves if you're, at a front desk or there's some background noise. Go ahead, Valerie.
Thank you. And I hear someone's phone ringing. So we are important. So stay with us. So civic engagement, definitely, I will read this definition, is a process of working to make a difference in the civic life of one's community and developing the combination of knowledge, skills, values, and motivation to make that difference. It means promoting the quality of life in the community through both political and non-political processes. I want to talk a little bit more about that right now, just because due to the nature of the political climate and the time that we're living in right now, oftentimes when we hear civic engagement, we think immediately of political processes and political involvement. But that is not the only way to be engaged and to be involved. And traditionally, that was a sort of a benchmark way of measuring whether or not young people were voting, or once they were 18, whether they were in a community assisting with voting, whether they knew how our political system worked, whether they knew that there were three branches of government, and that was really connected to this what you would learn in the civics or social studies or social science class in the K-12 school system. The broader definition that we're presenting here about civic engagement is really working in your community to make a difference. If someone had to sum it up in less words than that's on the slide, working in your community to make a difference. And that could be political involvement or non-political involvement. What's non-political processes? Well, young people may decide that, you know what, I recognize that there is blight in my community. There's lots of sort of abandoned homes or abandoned cars, or there could be a lot where people are dumping trash. This often happens in more urban environments. This is displeasing to the eye. It makes our community look unwelcoming. We want to do something about that, right? So those young people may choose to say, we're going to have a community cleanup, or we're going to connect with maybe the local leaders in our community to not only just do a once-off cleanup, but to incorporate and integrate this process into our community so that this area remains clean all of the time or most of the time. They might even convert that lot into a community garden or play center. That's one example of civic engagement. That's driven by young people. One of the things that we really want to emphasize is that in TRL, the best opportunities to keep young people engaged and to have them excited about their program is for them to drive the types of books that they read, and this may be a little bit redundant for later conversation, but also to drive the types of projects they get involved in. And those civic engagement projects could also include something such as small as perhaps there are some historical artifacts, right? So the Humanities celebrates life, as Jim said, and the things that give meaning to who we are as a country and as a community. So perhaps in your community there are historic buildings or there are statues and monuments that young people are not really familiar with the history of those monuments or those historic buildings, and perhaps they might decide through reading a text, reading a book, that they want to learn more about those spaces, right? And so they might decide to do some investigation and then create a blog or create a Twitter moment, or they make a photo montage of that particular artifact in the community where they've done some research, perhaps interviewed some people, maybe even used the resources at the library, maybe some that are available to get a better understanding of what these spaces and places are in their community. Another time, an example of a civic engagement program, young people may recognize that the seniors in their community have a rich body of knowledge they're ready and willing to offer, so they might decide to do semi-autobiographic interviews with those young people where they talk with them and learn about the community in which they live and the changes that these young people have witnessed over time. These are three examples of actual civic engagement projects that young people have been involved in. And so we think about civic engagement as, giving young people a chance to identify a need in their community and to do something about it, whether it's addressing an issue such as blight or whether it's learning more about the resources that are valuable or have been considered valuable in their community, or serving people who are less in need. I think oftentimes we may also say, young people have created a food drive for kitchens, or they've done walks. Young people have done it in our program as well, a walk for water, a walk for cancer, even in the case where it was a peer who had cancer. So they do smaller, bite-sized civic engagement activities as well. But with civic engagement, we really look to have earnestly young people consistently involved in different activities that make an impact more than a once-off, one-time impact. When you're getting started with civic engagement, we understand it might be easier to do a project where the young people say, we want to be involved in the March of Dimes walk, or the Walk for AIDS, or the walk for raising money for a center in our community. And we think that is great as well. But are there ways to extend that? And so that gives the young people an opportunity to communicate with others, to develop skills they may not have had, or to test those skills, and just to value what it is that already exists in their community, whether it's people, places, or things. Right? The next slide, we want to talk a little bit about why is civic engagement important. Civic engagement is really important because it gives young people the ability to increase their self-determination and to develop workforce skills, 21st century skills that are needed for employment. So how do you speak with people? How do you write a memo? How do you do a press release? What's important to communicate to people? And it also really helps enhance the 6 C's of positive youth development. So Richard Lerner is a positive youth development professor at Tufts University. He's done an extensive 10-year study study, longitudinal study, meaning over the years, he kept coming back to 4-H sites throughout the country and asking these same groups of young people and adults like yourself who work with him, like, what is going on in your positive youth development or your out-of-school time programming? And what we found and what we like to think of, and the research around, which very much mirrors what we've seen in the practice, is that there are 6 C's that positive youth development, specifically when you include civic engagement, can address: competence in young people, increase their confidence, making connections, whether it's with peers, adults, or others in their community, and developing character, so sort of helping them to think about their moral composition and character building. Sometimes that means that they're going to have to work with people and understand and learn about things that they disagree with, but they certainly will have the opportunity to build character through discourse and work. Caring and also contributing. Those are sort of the 6 C's that we like to think of when young people are involved in positive youth development, or PYD, that includes civic engagement, especially if it's youth-driven, meaning the youth decide what it is they want to do and address in their community, and they develop a project in tandem with adults or supported by adults to see that project through. I like to say there's a 7th C that's missing from this body of literature. More people are beginning to talk about it in their research realm. As I mentioned, I'm also a researcher at UVA, and that is culture. Because when you're working with young people in different environments, we've even begun to talk about this in Pennsylvania. They're very different geographically, financial resources. Schools are different. What types of out-of-school time experiences are available for young people, particularly teenagers? Are those spaces available? Is there a physical space where those young people can be? Do we take into consideration any language barriers? Do we take into consideration mobility? Do we take into consideration family dynamics that influence how young people express care, or the way that they contribute to their community, the way that they feel valued? And so when you have an understanding or an appreciation for culture, you can develop programs and work with young people in a way that's sensitive to their cultural experience. So that could be community culture, right? You may have a community that does maybe a cleanup once a month, or it could be even their home, race and ethnic culture, or immigrant culture, where they do things in a particular way, they communicate in a particular way, and you've made sure to be sensitive to those things and include them and incorporate them into your programming. Right? What we find through positive youth development and civic engagement, and we're starting to see this in our evaluation work as well, which is great, that means TRL is on the right track, is that young people who are involved in positive youth development programs that include civic engagement, particularly engagement where they get to drive the decision-making and be a part of the process, have lower levels of depression. They tend to have higher grades in school, less truancy, I mentioned that. And then they tend to want to continue contributing more to their community than youth who've not participated in TRL or other out-of-school time programs. How they contribute varies from space to space, but they decide to be involved and contribute. So we have young people who have participated in TRL. Libraries no longer run the model of support from PHC, but those young people are still involved in their library in a way that they weren't involved before becoming a TRL participant. Awesome. That's what we're looking for. That's a sustained involvement and attempt to make a difference, an opportunity to practice and build these 6 C's plus 1: confidence, competence, connection, character, caring, contribution, and also to celebrate culture, which is that plus 1. So thinking more specifically about TRL and positive youth development. What about TRL and positive youth development, right? So it works well. Why do we believe that TRL works so well? And why do we consistently look to improve? We like to use a continuous quality improvement model in our out-of-school time programming with TRL. And what that means is we do evaluation work. Many of you have been involved in that. Some of you will be in a conversation with us tomorrow. And throughout our program, the beginning, through the program while it's running, and at the end, say, what have we learned about TRL? How can the PHC support you? And how can we make sure that the support we provide for you is also helping those wonderful young people you work with? And so the primary way we do that is by introducing humanities content to teens in an informal, non-traditional format. Whether students are at a low-resource school or a high-resource school, most often school has a particular format and ebb and flow that young people come to expect. They're in school most of their day, with the exception of summer, and so they're not necessarily interested, particularly teenagers, in more school once they're out, once they've been dismissed for the day. And so TRL is very informal, although there's scaffolding for the program, meaning there are two people who typically work with the program. There's a number of sessions we recommend. There needs to be a book. But it's non-traditional, meaning that they're not sitting at desks unless that's all that you have for them. They could be sitting on beanbag chairs. Some sites have drop-in programs where they know that young people can't commit to 6 or 7 sessions, but young people can come to 2 or 3. They may have tables, they may be a game center, or a variety of activities young people can be involved in addition to working around the TRL curriculum, right? And so PhD defines the humanities as a way of thinking that allows us to discover who we are, to understand others, and to shape our world. And when we do that, the humanities represent knowledge and an appreciation for humanity. I'd like to stop here and just talk a little bit briefly about an example we had with young people and that, with our board, where we were talking about the Statue of Liberty and what the Statue of Liberty means and how could you make that an exciting, interesting lesson, or what do you know about the Statue of Liberty. So we talked about it being a place of hope. We talked about it sort of being a space where immigrants migrate. We know that it was a gift from France, the country of France, to celebrate the United States. But what's not often heard or told about the Statue of Liberty is that not only was it to celebrate the independence and to celebrate the end of the Civil War for the United States, but also the abolition of slavery. And what does that mean to us as a country? So there you have talking points. You get to illuminate the Statue of Liberty in a way that many of us have not heard or learned about. So I'm sure that if you stop, take a look around your community, if you haven't done already, there are items and people and places in your community that can be learning lessons and that they can connect directly back to a book, right? So if you were reading a book like La Línea, which is a book about migration and what that meant for family, you might begin to talk about the Statue of Liberty and extend that conversation. And then that might then contribute to a civic engagement project where young people can spark ideas and figure out what they want to do. We're not including the 5 steps of social action, but we do know that some of our sites have used the 5 steps of social action, which is how to do a project, how to do a project with young people, build consensus, allow them to take responsibility to choose a project that's feasible in the time that they have with you. But we do have that resource available. And for those of you who've not seen the 5 steps of social action, I'm sure you can get in contact with us to see, okay, how do I do this? How do I move from reading a book, a discussion, to integrating this information or resource in our community? There are also virtual spaces, thanks to the internet, where there's chronicling of history and images of communities as they shifted shape too many essence, where young people can also use that and connect to the humanities in that way. So those are some of the things that we do. And it really does work well because, it works best, particularly with older adolescents when young people are driving the book selection as well as the civic engagement initiative in which they want to be involved. There's the intersection between positive youth development and TRL. So there are over 30 attributes of well-run models of positive youth development. So where does TRL fit? How do we address those 21st century skills, those soft skills as people define them, beyond content knowledge to help people learn how to navigate and develop relationships in the workspace? When you're working with young people, we've taken this from some of our work and actually from our handbook and guide for TRL. What makes the program work well, and why does TRL work, and how does it address positive youth development? So even in library spaces, these are things, if you're talking with your director, your program coordinator, if you're trying to advocate for resources, if you're informing politicians or people in the community about TRL, you're lobbying for support, or even if you're writing a grant to expand or maintain what you're doing with TRL, here's a list of ways that TRL meets and addresses the needs of young people from a positive youth development perspective, high-quality staff and peer interactions. We try to support that. We try to support you in that by providing you with professional development specifically on TRL, as well as the youth development and civic engagement knowledge. We also do surveys to ask you, what do you need from us so that you can do a good job of working with these young people? We encourage you to ask specific questions when you're selecting your facilitator so that those facilitators have a good fit with the young people, which increases the quality of staff-peer interactions. Self-directed activities where teams can gain leadership. So building in time for young people to just kind of be, but also having activities that are part of the TRL programming where they can take the lead and you can just sort of support and encourage them. And that takes a little bit of adjustment because if you're working with middle school students or elementary school students, they're ready to take direction. You tell them what to do and they're ready to do it. You might have one or two who are excited and say, can you do it this way? But teenagers really want to take the lead and do it. And you do have to kind of coach them and provide some support, but that is what they want to do. Caring adults, autonomy, that safe space, that space needs to be physically safe, right, as well as emotionally safe. When we're reading books, for example, if we're reading The Maze Runner, if we're even reading the Black Panther, which is popular right now, or other Marvel comics, there are themes that come out of those books that might instigate a conversation among young people that is emotionally sensitive or could be volatile because of disagreement. So someone can be, a supporter of a political party that another group is not in support of. And so the young people sometimes have a really passionate conversation, but having that safe physical space and emotional space for them to do that with some support from you as an adult is important. Experiential learning, they learn by doing. Establishing trust, very important for youth who've been disenfranchised, whether they're poor youth or youth of color. If they're regularly disenfranchised in their school, neighborhood, and other communities, they're looking to make sure that you're consistently there and going to develop a relationship and you're interested in them as humans. So you give them opportunities even when they're trying you as an adult, right? Empowering them, setting clear expectations for their involvement, establishing a routine. Group and individual activities meet cultural needs, cultural-based projects and activities. So when we choose or select activities, make sure that they're inclusive. And then nurturing challenges and opportunities for genuine self-expression, right, which we may not agree with as long as it's not harmful to others. We do encourage young people to have that genuine self-expression. And really important to TRL, which will help with recruitment and retention, is youth-driven programming. So oftentimes we may say, I have this book, I think this book is great for the young people, but the young people may not want to read that. And we've heard that from TRL slides quite a bit. Even some of our first sites we picked. I had a book picked up, but it was not interesting to the young people. Once the young people were able to choose the book, the program flourished. So we really want to encourage you to plan your program, but also leave space for young people to take the lead and have opportunities. So that is pretty much sort of my robust rounding out of positive youth development, where TRL fits, and the importance of civic engagement. We also know that civic engagement involvement increases a sense of community belonging to the community when we're working with disenfranchised youth. So those youth who are lower resourced, whether they're in a rural environment or a suburban or urban environment, those youth who are lower resourced, who often don't have a voice who people talk about abstractly to say, there are these young people in my community who have lower resources, they've been exposed to violence. But when we work with them and give them the voice to address the issues that challenge them or that people are talking about that are related to them, but they're not talking to them, they do better. They really do thrive. And we're seeing that in our evaluation work. It's been good for all of our young people, but it's been particularly good for our young people who are ethnically and racially diverse or those who are poor. And every county in Pennsylvania has a group of poor young people, and they're not always young people of color. So when we give them the voice to address issues in their community that impact them daily and regularly, then we are indeed meeting their needs and serving as a positive youth development model, a good best practice positive youth development model. So I'm going to sort of pause and transition back to Jen, who's going to talk a little bit more about TRL, and then we're going to have our Q&A. We want to make sure we have time for that.
Yep. So actually, Valerie did an excellent job talking about Teen Reading Lounge, so I don't have a whole lot to add. Some things that I just want to make really clear before we go into our practitioner panel. I know many of you on the call kind of already know the structure of Teen Reading Lounge, but Valerie mentioned a few things that I realized that I wasn't clear about the framework for those of you who are new to Teen Reading Lounge. So a couple of things at Teen Reading Lounge, a couple of kind of like PYD. So if you go back to that, we don't have to, but if we go back to the interaction between PYD and TRL slide, this is a great place to kind of, it's almost like a checklist for you guys, thinking about how, where your programs are in terms of really meeting the positive youth development kind of threshold. And there are definitely ways to interpret some of these things that, we talk about a lot. And you can find a lot of information on the website. And in fact, some of the references that Valerie provided probably be great places to start if you're interested in understanding, well, what does it mean to, create projects that provide opportunities for social and interpersonal growth? What does that look like? There are definitely a lot of resources out there. But what I wanted to highlight is that, the high-quality staff peer interaction. So a couple of things about the framework is that Teen Reading Lounge is really, typically there are like two or more adults that are involved at the front end of Teen Reading Lounge, kind of, we call them frontline staff members. So it's either a librarian, an educator, an arts educator, someone who's working to kind of coordinate the program that's there pretty much on site all the time, and then someone who may be from the community who's coming in that works as what we call a facilitator. I think, what we're seeing as the program progresses is that even that site coordinator, that person that's on staff, also sometimes operates as a facilitator and maybe at all those sessions. But the idea here is that if you have, a group of 8 or more, there are some guidelines set out about how many what the youth to adult ratio should be. And we typically encourage our sites to be really aware of that. And at the very least, you have 2 adults there. Sometimes you might even have some additional staff members coming in to help support the program for discussion, because, kind of organizing and facilitating that can be a lot of work. So that's definitely a way that TRL intersects with the PYD best practices. Also, like Valerie mentioned, them having an opportunity to pick a book, gives their voice, puts their voice in the program or their interests front and center. And Valerie said this, clearly, but I just want to kind of underscore this point. The biggest learning that, Valerie has really challenged us to push our sites to do, so the biggest thing that we kind of as a group have learned since 2010 is that inclusive book list or reading list. If you guys are having, we know that there are a lot of issues with the way in which the publishing industry highlights certain books and certain authors and certain characters. That is changing for the better, which is great. But a lot of times the things that are like kind of at the fingertips is popular, the Hunger Games, those kind of books, feature characters that are frankly, white and, are written from authors that are from a certain background. And those are great, valuable books, and we've seen those books work really well with Teen Reading Lounge. But if you're working with a group that is not from that background, it really makes a difference to do the research to find books that reflect the young people that you're working with or that you hope to attract. And that may include doing some research on, books that are in a different language, right? We've had some discussions with some of our libraries about that and how that can be challenging for staff if they don't speak that language. So how do you find that? But doing a little bit of research and getting even that facilitator person who's coming in to help with the program, if they have some knowledge there, that can really, really help. So I definitely encourage you guys as you're building book lists. We've had our libraries do things like come up with a list of 6 books, and then young people will vote on the actual book that they read. That's one way to get their voice in there. And also you guys to kind of like set the stage for some books. It's kind of in between the whole, they have total control versus, it's a little bit more of a collaboration when you do it in that way. But you could do some research to find books with characters that are coming from diverse backgrounds. And it definitely, we've seen that make a huge difference. So I wanted to mention that. And then in terms of like kind of dosage, so when we say dosage, how many times are young people connecting with the program? There are definitely some great, there's research about how important that is. We want young people to be able to come back. The more that they are involved in the experience, so the more times they are coming to the program, the better the experience will be. It's kind of a no-brainer. But programs are run kind of like on a yearly basis, and libraries do several cycles, and it usually goes about 6 to 8 weeks, and the programs are biweekly or weekly. And that'll happen, like I mentioned, 1 to 2 cycles per year. So you're talking about kids, participating in at least 16 sessions of Teen Reading Lounge or more, which, from our evaluation or from the research out there, that makes a difference in terms of outcomes and being able to build relationships with young people that get them to this positive youth development place. So I'm going to stop there because I want to make sure that we have time to talk to our awesome practitioners. But if you guys have questions about Teen Reading Lounge or anything, we'll share our contact information at the end, and I definitely invite you to check our website to look at more information about Teen Reading Lounge. So I hope Valerie had a chance to get her some water, and I'm going to introduce our practitioners, and then I'm going to turn it back over to her so that she can have a conversation about the work that they've done. And unfortunately, we see that one of our pictures here of the great Shakira King is not showing up, but just know that it was a great picture, and hopefully when we send the slide deck, you'll be able to see it. So today, each of these women are representing a current Teen Reading Lounge site, and each serve their own unique community of young people, and you'll hear about that in just a minute. We have 3 individuals on today's what we're calling Practitioner Panel, so those that are actually doing the work in the communities with young people. So Joe Bradley is the out-of-school time director for the John W. Hallahan Catholic Girls High School in the Fairmount neighborhood of Philadelphia. This is Joe's second year at Hallahan, although she has a lot of experience working with young people in an out-of-school time environment. And this is her first year. I mentioned that we're doing a pilot project with 2 of these sites, and Joe is representing one of those sites, and this is her first year coordinating Teen Reading Lounge at Hallahan. Kim King is the Youth Services Coordinator and Assistant Director of the Priestley Forsyth Memorial Library in rural Northumberland, PA. Kim's been at the library for 13 years. She has a lot of experience working with children and youth, and also, she is a librarian at heart for sure. She has been running Teen Reading Lounge. 2018 marks her 3rd year coordinating the Teen Reading Lounge program, so she's got a lot of information to draw on. And this great picture of her with the group from last year shows how engaging Teen Reading Lounge and popular it has been at that site. And then finally, Shakira King is the Activities Director for Sunrise of Philadelphia, Inc., a youth-serving nonprofit located in the South Philadelphia neighborhood of Philly. It's in South Philly. She's currently working at South Philadelphia High School facilitating Teen Reading Lounge. She's been at the high school for 1 year, although she has about 4 years or more of experience working with young people in different capacities, particularly doing civic engagement and activism projects. And this is her first year hosting Teen Reading Lounge and facilitating discussion and activities. So Joe, Kim, and Shakira, just want to make sure you take yourselves off of mute. And Valerie, I'm going to turn it back to you for questions.
Okay, great. We've had a chance, obviously, to work with these sites who are active participants now to prepare for the webinar, so we're excited for them to share their experiences. And so we're going to start out with just asking you if each of you could tell us, and Joe, I'll start with you just in order of pictures, if you will. Tell us about the site where you are facilitating TRL, or TRL is being facilitated, and what does the surrounding community look like? If you could briefly tell us that, as well as who are the young people you're working with, the types of interests they have, and how does TRL help to meet their needs and interests?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joe Bradley. I'm with Hallahan OST. It's an out-of-school time program provided through Catholic Social Services, and we're located in the Fairmount, or the Center City section of Philadelphia, which means that we have a lot of access to everything. I mean, there's museums, there's library spaces, there's public transportation, and that means that students also come from every area of Philadelphia. They come from South Philly, West Philly, North Philly, every part of Philly, as well as even as far as New Jersey, for families that choose to send their students here. As far as the interests, it's everything. Our students are interested in everything. They want to make changes. They want to help each other. They want to do their own thing. They want to create their own future. So for the OST program, we try to do our best to help either guide them to the resources or understanding the plan rather than just the end game. And I think that that's when probably everybody can understand, trying to talk a teenager through the steps of something versus the end result. And that's about it for a quick synopsis.
Valerie, are you there?
Uh-oh.
I am. Sorry. So, Kimberly, I was going to ask if you could tell us a little bit about your community, where you're located in the state, as well as who the young people are, about the community, as well as your site. Thank you.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Where we're located, it's called Northumberland, Pennsylvania. We're right about in the middle of the state, about 45 minutes from Harrisburg, northwest, I think we are. We're very rural. If you don't have a car in our area, transportation is a challenge. Shikellamy School District is primarily the area that we're serving. It has a high dropout rate. It's also a very diverse area because Northumberland is kind of like the small town. Everybody wants to live here, but they work elsewhere. So like you want to live here and raise your children, where there's two bridges that connect us to where the high school is, that all of our students, there's 4 elementary schools and a middle school, which is now kind of on the Northumberland side of the river. It's brand new. It was built 2 years ago. And the high school is on the other side of the river in Sunbury, which is more a small town city. So it has a very different feel when you cross that river. So I think a lot of what we're doing with this program is we're kind of bridging that gap between the small town and the city. And the middle school is now on kind of our side of the river. That's primarily who we're working with. And it's really created a sense of, I guess, kind of community for the kids that live in Sunbury but come to Northumberland, because otherwise they may never experience this because the other 3 elementary schools are on that side of the river. So I think it's really just made that happen with our Teen Reading Lounge. And we're also working with the Schools for the 21st Century program. So they've been kind of our feeder group of definitely returning kids. We started in fall of 2015 and kicked off our program in spring 2016. Well, it was actually winter, but we called it spring. So we're definitely a rural community. So transportation, like I said, is a big challenge to these children.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that, Kim. Shakira, can you tell us about your site, where you are? Let us know, again, if you're an out-of-school library site. We have a mix on the phone. I know so far we've had an out-of-school time site and a library site. So, Shakira, what type of site are you? What's the community like? Who are the young people you serve, and what are their interests?
Hello, everyone. I'm Shakira King. I'm sitting in a public space, so there may be a lot of background noise from all the cars, so excuse me. But I work at South Philadelphia High, which is for Sunrise, which is an out-of-school time program. But I also work for another organization called the Future Project, and I am there during the day. So I have a lot of connection with the kids all day. South Philly is interesting. You know, a lot of people think that South Philly is all like Pat's and Gino's cheesesteaks and great murals. But it's also a community that is changing rapidly. Historically, I've grown up in Illinois, so historically, mostly Italian and Irish Americans that lived in South Philadelphia with a small number of black people. What's happening now is that there is a large surge of Mexican Americans that are moving to South Philadelphia, Colombian Americans that are moving to Philadelphia and are ending up in South Philadelphia because they're building their own community, as well as now there is a large population of Southeast Asian immigrants coming in. from other countries, from those countries. We're also a largely black city, although Philadelphia is the 6th largest city in the country. It's one of the poorest big cities. So our kids are living what's called below poverty, which means in extreme poverty. So a lot of the students are living in very living under very dire and extreme circumstances. They experience a lot of trauma, but that does not stop them from, like Joe said, being creative. We are near the subway line. We're near all the stadiums, so we're near basketball, football, and baseball. So you can imagine when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, my kids lost their minds. But South Philly High is really unique because culturally they love to bridge gaps on their own. So the other day, students were sharing food, and it was really interesting to see them talk about food from their culture and what it means. We also help them observe different religious and cultural holidays. So we're currently in the month of Ramadan. We make space for students to pray. We help celebrate Chinese New Year. And, for Black History Month, we went to go see Black Panther as a large group. I think we took about 160 kids, which is just about our population. Although the building is huge, our population is small. So that's essentially our school and our makeup.
Great. Thank you, Shakira, Kim, and Joe. So our next question, and also we want to remind those who are listening, and if you have questions, specific questions for the presenters, please put them in the chat box, and we'll make sure to have time to get to those questions. So what I would ask, and Shakira, you've done this a little bit, but can you tell us maybe one example of something you've done in this past year, just for all of the panelists? Just give me an example, an idea of what you've explored through TRL with your young people, and what book or books have you read, and how have you connected that to the humanities?
So race specifically is huge here in the city of Philadelphia because, as I said, it's a large city, and it's one of the quickly gentrified cities. It's becoming one of the most quickly gentrified cities in the country. And as you all know, recently we've experienced some racial tensions with police, but that is historic to Philadelphia, unfortunately, with administrations like the Rizzo administration, who actually dropped a bomb on some folks in West Philly and ended up killing 11 or 12 people. So Philadelphia is not unique to some of the harsh racial tensions that happen. But by looking at that and by talking about that, we've been able to use the books that we chose to bridge a gap. So, for example, our first book that we chose was Kindred by Octavia Butler. And what was unique about the book is that instead of reading the actual paperback book, Nindi Okafor, who is currently working on the next bit of Black Panther series, she partnered up with some other folks and started a comic book, and made the entire book a comic book. So it was nice to be able to reach the kids with this wonderful piece of literature, with this amazing Black woman that is Octavia Butler, and use a graphic novel to do it. So we stayed in the vein of graphic novels. I'm sorry, guys. So we stayed in the vein of graphic novels, and we moved from Kindred to the first book of the Black Panther series, which is called A Nation Under Our Feet, and Roxanne Gay's Woman of Wakanda, which explores these two Black queer women and their relationship with having duties to a nation and loving each other. So by having those very particular books, we were able to bridge a gap in a very strong and tangible way that allowed the students to ask questions of themselves and actually of their teachers as well.
Thank you, Shakira. So I'm going to ask Kim. I know that Kim, you have a different experience that it would be great for people to hear. Then I'll ask Joe if you could briefly answer that question as well. So I would just give a little more context to the city of Philadelphia. So Philadelphia is one of the poorest cities, but it's the wealth gap, right? So you hear a lot about the low resources, but it's the economic disparity that exists in Philadelphia. There is a multi-billion-dollar boom in building industry, new companies coming in, the reorganizing of neighborhoods, but that wealth is not distributed evenly across the people who live in the city, particularly those who are immigrants or those of color. And then Shakira also mentioned the move, which actually happened under the administration of Mayor Wilson Good, which came after Mayor Frank Izzo. But so there are some tensions that exist within the city of Philadelphia that aren't often spoke about, but have existed for a long time. So I just want to give a little bit of context and clarification for that, those statements. And then just move on to Kim and ask Kim if you could tell us, because of the unique space you're in, how you engage with young people. I think you have some fascinating information to share with us.
Sure. We decided to kind of this round of TRL do the classic books. So we kind of chose us, myself and the facilitator, to pick Alice in Wonderland, which, that has lots of connotations for everybody to think about. But we wanted to use it because we also have a varied reading level in our group, and that was a book that we could get on 3 different levels. So some of our teens read it as a graphic novel because they wanted pictures. Some read on, I'd say it was like a 3rd grade kind of beginner chapter book, and then some had the full text. So that really worked well for us because everybody felt successful with it. And what kind of came out of the book, and we totally did not expect this, it was when the Parkland shootings were happening. So, of course, as the teens came in, they were saying to us, hey, what this happened at school today, or this happened in school. And so it opened up this whole dialogue between us that they used us as a sounding board. So we compared and contrasted it with Alice's life, like how she went, we called it going down the rabbit hole, where she was uncertain as to what was happening to her. And the dialogue that happened with those teens was amazing because they really started to think about the character in the book and what was happening in their life, as they were doing disaster drills or safe drills at school. One of our facilitators, this was her 2nd round with us, and she's a public school teacher. So she could relate saying, this is what I do with my classroom. So for us, it was totally unexpected. And then we added in an art component with it too, where they designed a clock. And so we added in some time management skills. And it was amazing to see the teens open up to us as well as related to the book that we were reading.
Great. Thank you, Kim. That was really helpful. And many of us, if not all of us, are familiar with Alice in Wonderland. So what Kim shared was an example of how you can choose the text and speak to the varying reading levels of young people so that they can still be included in that process of reading and discussion associated with the topic. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about what you've been exploring this year and how you've connected maybe the book to humanities?
So for our site, the initial book selection for the kickoff book, so to speak, was a graphic novel that called In Real Life, which was really interesting. It dealt with a girl that was recruited into the gaming community, and it seemed like a great fit since our students that were interested in TRL were into online gaming. It led to some great discussions about their role, and Hallahan is a private school, so their uniforms kind of mark them in their day-to-day life, and there's a lot of expectation for their behavior and how they interact, and we've had discussions on that and, how to maintain their comfort while they're still in uniform and making their way about the city. The next book that we went with was The Hate U Give, actually recommended by a student that did a pop-in visit for the TRL site because they had some time after school and they were curious what it was. They had started reading the book and they kind of sold it to the girls, and that became a great segue into some of the violence that's been going on and just understanding the various perspectives and hearing the girls share their own experiences within their life with violence and how their parents have trained them either to cope or not to cope with it, and what are some ways that they've kind of minimized knowing that violence happens in their neighborhoods, which was really eye-opening for myself and the facilitator, just because the school itself, it's almost like a bubble. When you've got the kids in the school, you hope that they're safe and you hope that they're learning the best that they can, and then sometimes it's easy to forget that they themselves, just like adults, have a life outside of school. So talking to them about that and creating that space where they could have those conversations with us was really great. So we've kind of stuck with that theme of things that they can bring in from their own experience and share, as well as books they're just interested in, books that they've heard the titles of and they haven't had a chance to read, and they haven't really gotten to do an in-depth exploration, so we've been able to help with that. And it's been really interesting that a lot of the books that they've lent towards were either strong female characters for the lead or were written by women. One of the books was Ready Player One, which is a male writer and a male main character, and the overall consensus was that it was flat in comparison to the other stories. So it's kind of interesting to see them pick up on those details and differences.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that, Joe, Shakira, and also Kim. I'm not going to necessarily, I want to make sure we have some time for questions and answers, so I'm not necessarily going to read all the questions in order, but I wanted to speak to this other question that I think is really important, so that you have an opportunity to talk about this. So specifically, and Joe, you just gave an example, but let's get to question 7. I think this is important, 7. I think it's important when we begin to think about this as youth-driven programming. So I want to ask, how have young people shaped your program? Like, what have they done to shape your program? And what opportunities were there for contributing to the community? So whether it's the community where your site is located or the community at large. And if you haven't done that yet, what opportunities are available to connect to the community? So that's the 7th question, or the last question on the slide. Anyone can go first.
I'll start with that one. So our program, the OST program at Hallahan in general, is heavily shaped by the student interest. We make sure that the activities that we offer, the program projects that we offer, are of the interest of the student. Within Teen Reading Lounge, other than that initial book selection, all of the books have been chosen by the students, either by vote, by nomination, or through just conversation and, seeing a book that they were interested in and going with that. They helped create the space that the school was kind enough to donate for our youth, so that they have a dedicated space for Teen Reading Lounge that's their own, and they are a little bit protective of it, which is interesting when, other activities ask if they can utilize the space. The girls themselves are the first to say, well, we've got things set up in there we don't want to move around, and we're working on something in there, and we'd like to make sure it stays nice. And then within the community, there's been this really great trickle effect, basically, or domino effect of the advertising for Teen Reading Lounge and showcasing the books that we're going to be working with or going to next for more students that want to join. The Language Arts Department has really picked up on just the students themselves in the building being interested in reading and needing that calm, just focus on something for fun versus a grade versus quiz versus, that crunch time that a lot of our students are going through multiple times within the year. So they've actually, this whole month of May, they've done sustained reading once a week in homeroom for students to bring in their book selection and to read it. And it's created some great conversation about book selection and what types of books people prefer to read. We have a few students that really only like graphic novels because traditional books just have been intimidating to them because of all of the attachment to testing and homework assignments and quizzing. So we've been able to help with that. I've actually brought in a couple of my own comics for them to read, since going through them so quickly, they don't put them down, which is great. And then as far as the school community, one of the things that our students identified as a thing that they wanted to talk about and work on was the student morale and how to engage and create positive experiences for the rest of their classmates within the school, and just ways that we could do that, and opportunities that we could create for students to share positive or negative feedback about the experience and how they can support each other with that. So that's really interesting, because that's one of the first things that they brought up, and that's been a continuing conversation with all of the different things that we've done within Teen Reading Lounge and within OST for engaging the students here at Hallahan.
Great, that was really
and
helpful.
I'll pass it off to Kim or Shakira.
Kim or Shakira, did you want to offer? Yep.
Yeah. I want to apologize for giving you guys the information that I gave you first a little jumbled. I'm sorry. I'm actually coming from one school event. They actually invited me to come and talk about civil engagement today. So I'm in transit, so I really apologize for that. But the way that the students have shaped the program is much like Joe's experience. Like, initially we sat down and I told them that I was starting. I told them it was a book club, and they were like, "Miss Kara, I'm not reading." And I was like, but you will. They were like, I was like, "I'll get you to read. It'll be fine." They were like, "I'm not reading. Who reads anymore?" I was like, everybody. What are you talking about?
Everybody.
So that's why when I came up with the idea for, like, comic books, and, like, Afrofuturism is really up and coming. It's getting this really huge platform now that we have Black Panther and all these other great Black-centered comic books out. So I presented them with a couple options, and when I immediately talked about Kindred, we got into this conversation of, if you could go back in time and send your ancestors one thing, what would it be? And then it turned into, I will go back and go send them an airplane, and I will go back to, and give them guns, and I will go back and do, and, tell them that this is the way that they need to be, and it really kind of sparked a conversation. So when I presented all the books together, and Black Panther and Kindred kind of came up together, they were like, "We want to do these." So they had already picked both the books for each cycle by the time, like, at the beginning of the program. So what was great about it was, because they already knew what they wanted to read, it was easy for them to come back the second cycle and just kind of be like, "Okay, yeah, we did this, now we're on to this, and the movie is out, and we're going to go see Infinity Wars after that." So it kind of just worked out all together, because I just presented them with the options, and they just took it and ran with it.
Great. Thank you so much. Kim, did you want to add to that question before we move on?
Sure, because we had kind of an unexpected outcome. We've had this group make a pathfinder kind of what's available in our community, because we did this with our group before last. They had to sit down and think about, like, well, if somebody was new to the community, where would they go? Like, where would they go to find a restaurant? Where would they go to shop? Where would they go to have fun? Where would they go to hang out? So they actually developed kind of a teens list of, like, cool places to go. And we have shared that with the high school, and we also made some copies and put them, like, at our YMCA. So I think they really had ownership with it. And some of the kids have been returning, so they remembered that they did that. And what they did with this past round is we were talking about like how Alice was probably very privileged in her life and she had all the things she needed, but maybe her home life wasn't as safe as it could be, or the way she wanted it to be. So we actually got involved with one of our local churches and did kind of a mini food drive. They have a blessings box where people can put things in or take things out as they need them. So that was kind of our culminating project for this group. And it kind of really grew out of the Pathfinder because one of the teens that was in our group talked about how as a young child she was homeless. And she's like, I'm not anymore, but that's still a part of who I am. So she disclosed to the whole group that she had lived in one of the shelters that we had talked about helping. So for the group itself, I think it really opened up, hey, this is a real person that we know that this happened to. And she was open enough to be able to share that. And I think for them to just kind of pull together as a group and realize we can do something, we can help people in our local community was very fulfilling for them.
Kim, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit, was that the kind of service project or civic engagement initiative that they were initially going to be involved in, or was that a change as a result of the conversation? How did they make that connection?
We kind of were leaning towards that, as we went through the book and went through our 8 weeks. But we kind of changed midstream because once they learned that one of their friends had experienced homelessness, had experienced food insecurity, they talked about perhaps helping at the shelter that she had lived in, and we got in touch with the shelter. So we're planning to hopefully carry that on this summer with our summer group by visiting and doing some follow-up projects, even if it's just going into the shelter and, doing some craft projects or something like that. But it really made them think. I think they were really thinking about where they live and how their lives compared to the character in the book, and also how people's lives can be very different. So it wasn't really our plan to help with the blessings box, but that was kind of what came out of it in the end. So I think, too, part of it was that the group, like, being the time frame that we did it, the group felt very insecure about what was going on in their world, and this was a way that they could help and feel good about themselves, and also help their community.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, Joe, and Shakira. So I'm going to parking lot for a minute. I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions from the audience and just reiterate a couple key points from the answers we've had so far. So Joe really spoke about the young people taking ownership of the space, actually having a physical space that they organize and set up so they know that's their TRL home. That's really important to that space that we talked about. Kim's example of, children feeling very vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable because of what was happening across our country with the shootings in Florida, but then also wanting to channel that energy into doing something, and how that connected not just with the book that they were reading, but the lived experience of young people in their groups who they were not aware of. And then that, of course, prompted them to say, this is the type of civic engagement, community-based initiative that we're interested in. And then also Shakira to say, here's the context of being a young person in Philadelphia. And then, how do we begin to talk about what we're experiencing as a young person, particularly if her group of young people fall below the poverty level? How do we talk about that in a first-person way? So choosing books that were not just general books, but that were written by authors of color, and then using those books to instigate a conversation that related to what they were seeing and experiencing in their community. So these different ways of using TRL to engage with young people, but also to meet them where they are. Is really relevant, important work that we do, and especially that you do. Are there any questions that you have for the presenters? I'm conscious of time. We have 10 more minutes left. They certainly could answer more questions, but are there specific questions that anyone has for the presenters that you'd like them to address or to answer?
Hi, Valerie. This is Jen. We got a question through the chat box from Kevel Bowen, who's one of our former facilitators. He worked out in Lansdowne at the Lansdowne Library about a year or two ago. And he's asking, I've struggled with introducing or even coming up with community projects. Can the participants or anybody on the call share their struggles and how they overcame them? I think what Kevel's asking is how do you kind of work through figuring out how to introduce them and select a project?
Yeah, I can speak to that because that's a struggle I'm currently having. One, because I'm working with limited resources, and two, because just trying to get the kids engaged around projects. That word project, I've been trying to figure out how to use another word. Excuse me, I'm sorry. How to use another word because a project feels like homework, and kids don't want to do homework, which is why they don't do homework. It feels like, well, if it's not a grade, why do I have to do it? So just trying to make sure that the things that we do aren't just fulfilling to the program, but fulfilling to them as individuals as well. So introducing them to Photoshop and video editing, and now we're gonna make a video. So and posters to post up and little affirmation cards. So just trying to figure out things that kind of drive them will help it not feel so project-y, if that's a word.
That's great. Thank you. Joe or Kim? Kim, you gave a great example. Joe, did you have an example? I know that your young people said.
Well, our program, it's our first year with the TRL program, and, seeing what we can get our kids to do, especially after school, is difficult. One thing that we have done this year, and it was really an opportunity through connecting with another TRL site with Erin at the Rittenhouse branch of the library, and a book that her group was going to be reading. Our group all read it, and there was an opportunity to meet the author. The girls just they gave up a day off from their Easter break to meet this author and to have a TRL session, and gave up their own time. And when that happened, when they got to ask those questions and really see the person that shared their story, it triggered them to want to help others. And how could they do it in a way that wouldn't put that person at risk? That was the book was Dreams and Nightmares, and it's a great story about the travels of a young woman leaving her home underage and making her way to America, and then getting caught up in not only the immigration system but the foster care system, and landing in Philadelphia in the neighborhoods that they know, into the environments that the girls themselves understand. And they're now trying to figure out a way to, help create a guide for others trying to do that won't be confiscated, that won't be obvious, that how can you create something that is a tool but doesn't look like a tool to someone that doesn't know it's a tool. So it's been an interesting experience for them to have that direct connection with someone that has shared their story, and then to try to create a way for others to also go through that situation safely. So I think just once they connect with it, they're willing to pretty much do anything, and it is hard to get them to connect to things when they have so many other obligations and requirements put on them as students, as young people, as whatever role in their family they function in. And if that's in the capacity of a caregiver of younger siblings or helping out with family financial needs, there's a lot of pull on our students. And the Teen Reading Lounge has not only given them that space and that opportunity to just be kids sometimes and to just read for fun and to have conversations and to connect with their friends and to grow friendships with people that they don't always get to see. But I think our facilitator and I have done an amazing job working together to just nurture those little ideas where they're like, well, what if this? And then pulling from that and pulling from that and pulling from that, which is it's a slow process sometimes, but once you get one kid and they're willing to sell it, it works really great. And then we've just we're going to be working from that for our next year with TRL also, of, really getting the kids themselves to own the program and sell the program and encourage the students to participate. And we've reached out to the school itself for extra credit opportunities within what they do. So sometimes that incentive and that collaboration with the school, I know that a lot of the sites aren't based within a school itself, and some departments aren't necessarily willing to offer up that extra credit, that golden extra credit, however they want to apply it. But sometimes making those connections and having that other person encouraging the students can help reinforce it and just be in their ear and on their mind, and it's not just for necessarily something that's fluff that's not going to have an impact. It's another way for you to express yourself, and it's a long process. I think that's going to be an issue for any project if they're not really motivated to connect to it. So it's finding those ones they want to connect to it, just like Shakira has mentioned, just like Kim's example. The ones that they want to connect to are the ones that they're willing to do the work for.
Great. Thank you so much for those examples. Do we have any more questions? I know that we're down to our last 4 minutes, and it's always tough to get through all of our questions, but we're hoping that the examples you're hearing of how you work through encouraging youth and acknowledging what the challenges are, but being persistent is what we're hearing, and also creative. Jen, are there other questions that have come through the chat room, or if someone wants to unmute themselves and jump on the call and ask a question, we welcome you to do that now.
Yeah, this is Janet. I just wanted to mention that Aurora from the Free Library, West Philly branch of the Free Library, they're running Teen Reading Lounge right now. She had some resources that are listed in the chat box specifically for Kevil's question. So she mentioned that there are, and we're furiously typing some of those down so we can kind of have a list of them and share them out. So websites like DoSomething.org, Teaching Tolerance, which is I know I share a lot of resources from Teaching Tolerance. They have examples of youth civic engagement projects and how to kind of kickstart them. Think Before You Type is another, I think it's on YouTube. Radical Brownies, Youth United for Change, I think that's part of the Teaching Tolerance. Mix It Up Creatively. There are a lot of, Kevil, there are a lot of, and others, if you guys are interested. There are some other models out there that you guys could take a look at, and I do want to give a plug for Valerie's 5 stages of social action. I know that, we're talking a little bit about both the motivation or the personal connection of young people to doing these projects and kind of having them see the value in it, or having them tap into their own, kind of motivation to do it. And that is a challenge, but that's something that, if you're doing some PYD practices, hopefully comes out. But if you're looking for, one way to kind of show them how to do this is to walk them through it step by step. And Valerie's 5 stages for social action, which we'll share, is a series of questions that helps young people think through what's going on in my community or in my school or in my life. What do I care about? Is there something that we can do about it? And if so, what are some ways that we can address it? And then picking one of those projects. It's not an easy process, not going to lie. We had Erin Hoops, who's from, Joe mentioned, from the Rittenhouse branch of the Free Library, do this multiple times with her young people. And she mentioned it's hard to come to consensus sometimes, but in that process, you get so many critical thinking skills, like they're practicing communication, they're practicing collaboration, they're practicing critical thinking about how they might be able to solve a problem. They come up with a solution, they may work out, oh, that's not going to do anything, that's just going to scratch the surface and we want to go deeper. Or, that's where we want to start because we don't know where else to go. So I just wanted to give a plug for that as well. It's the 5 stages for social action, and we will share that with you guys. And you could try it out, kind of low stakes, just try to work through it with your young people and see how they respond to it. Other than that, though, we didn't get any other questions, and I know we're close to time. So I did want to mention that you can, so number one, if you do have other questions, you can send them to me. You can also contact anybody on the, that was a part of this call. I just want to, thank everybody. So let's do the thank yous. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank Valerie for talking through positive youth development and defining that and the importance of civic engagement in that, the 5 C's, or the 6 and 7 C's, I guess I should say. So thank you, Valerie, for that. And to our talented practitioners, Joe Bradley, Kim King, and Shakira, thank you all for being a part of today and talking about your experience. We've been furiously writing some notes here that we're going to share too with some kind of high-level things that hopefully strategies and ideas that you guys can take home and try in your own program. And I did want to mention, so you can contact us, and also you can join us on Facebook. We have a special Facebook group where we, people post questions and strategies and successful projects that they've done. So please join us. We'll share that link's here, and we'll also share these slides so you have it. So any other, Valerie or panelists, do you guys have any closing thoughts before we end for the day?
This is Valerie. I just want to thank everyone for participating, our panelists, as Jen said, as well as those who called in. We like to reinforce and celebrate all the good work you're doing. We know in some cases it's not easy, in other cases it is indeed. And certainly reach out if you have more specific questions. Our hope was for you to see how to make all those connections and hear from TRL sites about how they do this work and why it's been successful at their site. So thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Absolutely. Panelists, any last words?
Just hope everybody has a wonderful day, and any questions that you used to send my way, I'll try my best to help with.
And I think it's a lot of fun. We love doing it. So, hang in there and keep trying and just have fun with it.
That's great. Thanks, Kim. Shakira, anything? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I know the work is hard and the subjects are hard and the students are dealing with a lot. But remember to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't continue to do the work. So make sure that, you take at least 5-10 minutes to yourself every day to check in with your body, make sure you drink enough water, so that they can continue to have the best experience and you can continue to have the best experience possible.
That's a great last thought, Shakira. Thank you for that. Self-care, we know, very, very important, so make sure you guys are taking care of yourselves as well. Final thought, we're going to send a post-event survey, so please take that. Any thoughts that you have on improving today's webinar or anything that worked really well, we'd love to hear about it. And don't forget to visit www.pahumanities.org for more information about us and the projects. And thank you all. Have a great afternoon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.